Welcome to Beauty Space TV. No, we have here with us Vaijayanti Balchandra and Rahul Balchandra, the directors of YLG salons across Bangalore and Chennai, 56 salons and counting before COVID came. And then I believe we will wait and watch. And of course, it will be a brisk business soon. Welcome to Beauteous Past TV, Vaijayanti and Rahul.
Thank you.
Um, so, I have been looking forward to this talk because this is the first couple talk that we are having.
Okay.
We're couples together in business and, doing so well. My first question to both of you, Vaijayanti, you can start and then Rahul can take it up, is it's very simple. What are when you look back to your journey from 2008, when you co-founded YLG Salons to now, it's over, 10 years. And in 10 years, you've, really built yourself as a salon chain, as an amazing education, you've laid foundation for an institute. So just share with us some of the key milestones, which brought you here, and which, when you reflect, you feel these were the real, watershed moments for your business.
Okay. So the first thing that I think was most important to us was the fact that we started with the education bit. I think that helped us bring in the best foundation that we could, because as you said, the skilling was the most important part, and being able to educate the people to the kind of service levels that we were wanting to put in into YLG was the most important thing. So the institute began in 2008, and then in 2009 the YLG salons opened their doors January 2nd, as a matter of fact. And up till now, we have trained more than 6,500 people pro bono through our education. And in 2010, the next milestone, if you talk about the milestones, was the home services. So we started with the big hot pink vans, which used to go around Bangalore doing the services, and we kept that model till 2015. And in 2015, we saw that everything was transitioning to tech. So then we took some time to build an app, and in 2017 we came back with the new avatar of the YLG at Home in the YLG at Home app-based home services model. These are the three important things till then. And then we also went into stages across the years into our own private label. So we have had our own in-house wax since day one, since we started. There's always been a range which has been in use in-house for the services. And then in 2018 beginning, we took the step in having some product range outside in retail outlets also. So YLG products under the YLG brand name are now available in Spar, Metro malls, and Health and Glow, all these other outlets also. Yeah, and we also started our e-commerce part at almost similar time, 6 months after that. So
that's, I think, a very holistic and well-planned, business strategy to have a private label and your retail at the same time. That's interesting. Rahul, how would you like to add to that?
So I think she's already covered the highlights. Yeah. But I think the one of the first learnings or milestones was really in the first year to be able to roll out a significant number of salons. So that gave us the confidence that we can scale and we can make it bigger. Surely in terms of ability to execute. So I think that was the first milestone for our building confidence that we could build a business of larger scale. And the second milestone I would say is that in the third year of our establishment, we were able to become profitable, and that was a validation that the business model we have built was fairly strong, and that it could be now we could build on that and keep growing. So these were the, I would say, the key milestones from the point of view of the business. And from then, of course, as Vajanti has explained, that we have added on new elements or the new dimensions to the business. And those, again, the milestones will be when we validate those business models, because those are very new as of now. So once that gets validated, or the whatever form of that gets validated, is the one which we will take to the next level.
So just to add to that, we have become a more of an omni-channel brand now across different channels, which has always been the objective for us.
Sure. Okay. In fact, I think you were one of the first guys to get funding, for your salon chain.
Yeah.
Would love to hear what kind of what it took to first get that first funding, how it felt like, and then what were the lessons from there? What were you like? Was there a lot of pressure to grow? And there are a lot of people who say, we should get massive VC funding, and that's where we, we pulled it off as a business. While some would say, no, you should, do X number of things, spend X number of years in business, and then kind of look for funding, if at all. So what has your experience been like, and just share your lessons, please.
So I think the first thing to understand is that any kind of funding, it is a risk capital which you are attracting, right? And it also is, you are basically giving a share in the company to somebody else. So it's a joint ownership. And therefore, how do you build those bridges? How do you build that relationship with the investor? How do you build the confidence in the business model? So what it allows you to do initially is that it gives you capital to experiment, to do certain things. So if you have certain ideas and you can convert that into reality much quicker than if you build it, over a period of time, because otherwise it will be slow. So it sort of allows you speed. That is the first benefit. But the learnings are basically in terms of how do you manage the relationship with these, investor partners, and give them the confidence that be transparent with them. They need to trust you. You need to trust them. So it's a relationship which has to be built, and you have to constantly work on it. It's like a marriage. Right. So, you have to work on it constantly. It's not that, one time and you got the check and that's the end of it. It doesn't work like that. So it's a relationship. I think that's the most important thing.
Yeah.
And I mean, what are the basic learnings? I would say that the learning is that that model of funding comes with its own set of requirements. If you are positive about it and you want to, use it to the advantage of the organization, it's brilliant. But maybe if you're not ready for it, it will become a sort of a restriction in the way or your working style.
Sure.
So along with it also comes a very strict, governance, a lot of oversight in terms of audits, not just the statutory audit, but the internal audit as well. So there is a whole lot of processes which are forced upon you, which may be far ahead of the requirements at the time when they are put in. Yeah. So it might feel at that point of time that, we are such a small organization. Why do we need so many things?
Sure.
But those are the things which will help you to sustainably scale and build the organization. Okay. So in the long run, it benefits the organization. But so it's like voluntarily saying that, okay, I am ready to take on these restrictions and do so many more things than what it would take for an organization of, the size at which you are at that point of time.
So do you think the scaling or scaling up of the business has happened enough, and that you're ready for another, fund infusion? Are you looking for it at all, or what's your
See, also the funding has its own cycles, and there is also a market sentiment and an investor interest in a sector and so on, which happens. So right now, I think with this whole COVID thing, so funding and all right now is all everything is on hold for quite some time.
Absolutely. Okay. So coming back to education, Vajanti, you decided to have a strong education foundation from day -1 before you started the salon chain. You built your education institute. So why you took that route? Whereas people generally, when they enter the industry, they start the salon chain, and then perhaps they build, somehow they build a adjacent system of educating people or upgrading the skills at the most. So why did you think the other way around? And what exactly are you delivering in your institute? What percentage of people are there whom you are upgrading? What are the percentage you are educating? The new ones that are entering the industry. How many are you inspiring to kind of maybe switch their careers? Like you guys have come from, engineering and management backgrounds and built this beautiful beauty services business. So tell us how is it going at your education segment of it?
Yes. So when we started initially, what we felt was the challenge was to be able to get the kind of, skilled people in the wild space that we wanted. And, we always feel that challenges are opportunities. And how can you convert them into an opportunity which works for you? So what we said that since we have this amazing opportunity in front of us, why not take it with us and go ahead? One thing also could be because I come from a research background, so before this I was working on solid state ionics and a lot of scientific research based activities. So thinking also probably is oriented towards education. So I think that was a natural extension to take it ahead and say that let's build something which will last over a period of time and keep adding to us in different ways over the time as we go on ahead. Because different education needs are needed at different points of time. Right now also the hygiene education need which was there, it was done online seamlessly across the organization because of the strength of the organization in teaching behind it. And for us being able to have that easy way of being able to teach people over a period of time has been one of our biggest strengths. That is how it has gone ahead. More and more, as you said, we are seeing a lot of people. We have students who are engineers who come and learn in the academy. We have people who come from different countries at times to come and learn in the academy. And we also have people who want to become entrepreneurs who come and learn with us, right? So it's a wonderful mix of people that you keep interacting with and see growing right in front of you. And I think it has created a significant impact in the south of India in the last 10 years in the different aspects of where this business touches wherever. Rahul, you want to add?
Yeah, Rahul, if you can add.
No, I think we are good. She's already covered the entire.
Okay, so what kind of, if you were to give me an insight into, what percentage of, say, entrepreneurs, stroke, then hairdressers and makeup artists in South, what is happening? What's the trend like? Who's, wanting to do more of what? Are you producing more of makeup artists or hairdressers? And I'll tell you a small tale of one of the academies I work with here, where it was built as a holistic course for salon and for business actually, and media. So it's called fashion media makeup course, and it's just reduced to becoming a makeup course because everybody there wants to become a celebrity makeup artist. So it's a famous institute. But I wanted to understand, what is your experience, what you set out to do, and has the experience been any different?
Okay, so we wanted to create a place where people would get a holistic education, like how you said. And in that course, we have accredited ourselves with a lot of international organizations also, like CIPTAC, CIDESCO. We also are a L'Oreal Arth Partner Academy. We also have our own courses, which we offer with our certifications. One of the best developments has also been to be able to have accredited courses along with the BNWSSC, the Sector Skill Council, which has been very supportive in making these courses and having the certifications done. So hats off to them for that also. And what we have seen is that we wanted to create an equal balance, but what we do more of is skin and hair. So we do beauty and we do hairdressing more than I would love to do more makeup, but the percentage of students who maybe in this area who are picking up on makeup may not be that much.
Right.
So we attract the maximum number of people in our beauty therapy and hairdressing courses as of now.
Oh.
Also, lately there have been inquiries about salon management. So we have built up kind of a module that we will now introduce, where we can start teaching some modules of salon management, which the industry will find useful. Also, currently with the new situation, we are also creating more online courses, which we can start promoting more, and maybe have students anywhere across the world be able to have access, because that's the beauty. You can the number of people that you can connect with now has suddenly exponentially risen. It's like amazing. That discovery has been amazing, that you can connect.
So that's interesting. Then moving on to the franchise business, there has been before COVID, I'm talking of the pre-COVID era of salon industry, and we were seeing like this, all the chain salons were like rapidly expanding in all directions. Like there was a mayhem actually in some cities where people didn't know what's happening, and one local market has, like where my office, the local market has 40 salons. It's unbelievable. Yeah. So that was the way the salon was sprouting and expanding. So what has your strategy been when it comes to expansion and franchising, and why you have taken the route that you have done?
So we have so far not got any franchisees at all. And my good friend from Delhi has been, always after me saying, why don't you franchise? Why don't you franchise? But so what we believe is that for a brand, initially, if you want a sustainable or a long-term business,
Yes.
then the core of the brand has to be very, very strong. So certain things have to literally be a matter of religion and almost sacrosanct for people in the brand. Because ultimately the culture you set for the brand is what will sustain, and that is what the brand will be known for.
Yeah.
Right? So if you see any of the large service or service retail kind of organizations, each of them have a very unique culture about how they do their business, how they treat their people, how they treat their customers, and that is what we first want to get absolutely. So it should be like a almost rock hard that nothing can shake it.
Oh.
Then we can start adding franchisees, partners, and then inducting them into that kind of a thought process.
Yeah.
That is as far as the culture and the processes and this is concerned. Now, looking at the strategy for franchising, franchising for expansion's sake is not something which we are very much in favor of. What we would like to do is to look at franchising in markets where we will personally or as a company, we may not be able to operate in the near future. So to build a business in those cities, we could have franchise partners. So it is a strategic reason. It is not that, oh, I want to tomorrow build another 100 outlets. So let's go and take somebody else's money and get them to join with us.
Yeah.
And also, if you want to do justice to the franchisee, then we have to make sure that the franchisee also is equally successful. Only then it will be a sustainable and the brand will grow. Otherwise, it will have a negative impact on the brand in the long term.
Sure. So all the current 56 salons are company-owned salons for you.
That's right.
How easy or tough is it to, maintain the quality across this segment? And would love to hear from you what kind of technology you're using to build this seamless, similarity in these salons, the similarity of standards and process.
Vajanti, you want to take that on first?
Sure. So if you want to talk about technology, then what we have done is we have brought in skin analyzing cameras last year before this entire thing, which we have now put on a little bit of a back burner for now. But that was a tech which we brought in last year with the skin camera analysis and diagnosis, for which kind of service a customer should go ahead for. The first thing which we started when we opened, I think we could be the only salon in the world to do this. We certify each and every person in the salon for what services they can do. Yeah, so if I'm a beauty therapist or a hairstylist, then I will be certified for each and every service which is available on the menu. And only after I am certified will I be able to provide those services on the salon floor, because the software is built like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So is that conveyed to the customer when the customer comes to you? Does he know that that's the kind of detailing that you're doing for the people who are working with you?
I think we can work harder at conveying it to the customer.
Our job is to be curious.
No, absolutely. It just makes us realize that that is a very important aspect. Maybe the customer would want to know how much effort is going on in the background for making sure that the correct certified person is the one doing the service for you.
So since we're already talking so loud about the hygiene, care that we're taking, might as well talk about this as well.
True.
Absolutely.
You want to add, Rahul?
Yeah. So the other thing which we have, done is that we have basically tried to build a lot of predictability across all the centers, so that if I visit center A, B, C, X, Y, Z, 99% of the times they should function exactly the same. For the customer, she should not feel a difference, and that's what ultimately a brand should provide to the customers. Because they are coming in for a YLG experience, they're not coming in for a YLG location A, location B experience. And that's where we also use a lot of real-time, what should I say, geotagging and monitoring of what is happening on the floor for our checklisting, for our operating processes. We have a lot of audits which are continuous, which is both technical as well as financial and operational audits. So there is a very strong, what should I say? So we've broken down everything into, the little pieces, and we keep focusing on, duplicatability, repeatability, consistency. So it's boring work, but that's the only thing which will keep the brand going.
Sure. So while we are on this, I would also like to know, what kind of poaching issues you facing down south? Because we very well know that in Delhi and Mumbai, it's really, really bad. How is it in Bangalore and Chennai? The poaching issues, the taking the staff for extra pay and running away with the staff.
So, see, as a normal, if you see over the years, there has been a trend for us as a company where we have seen a fairly stable attrition rate, which has been gradually trending down rather than moving up. So this has been consistent over the years, excepting for probably an exception about 2 years ago. So there was a blip, or there was an exception because of, I would say, some disrupting kind of a player in the market. But I think that was a one-off case, and I think it's now back to the similar trend where our attrition rates have consistently reduced over time. And yes, people do leave. I mean, I would love to have much lower attrition than what we do even today, but it is not something which we cannot cope up with. So the engine is completely geared up to be able to handle that attrition, bring in fresh talent, and equip them, train them to our standards very soon. And they also start coming online very fast.
So there are two questions. I think they can be linked to each other. One is, of course, the private label that you've launched, and why you chose to launch your private label, and you started again much in advance with your own waxing line and things like that. And then you have the retail bit where mostly salons are lagging because they just don't focus so much on retail, whereas they're mostly across the industry in India, the potential of retail is much more than what is actually being done on the floor. So how is it for you, retailing, and also your private label experience, whichever you want to take first?
So I'll go with the private label one first. The thought, if I can explain it, has always been to be a YLG, to be a place which provides a 360-degree solution to our customer for all their beauty and hairdressing needs. So, whether it is service, whether it is product, whether it is any other aspect of beauty, whether it is beauty advice in some way, that has been the objective which we started with, that to be a 360-degree solution to the customer out there. That is primarily where the private labeling thought also started, and we took it in stages to start off first with having products and services in-house, and then having products in retail. So first we started with our nail paints. That was 8 years ago. So yeah, and then slowly we have added. We have up till now we have nail paints and we have skincare products in the range. We also have a patented product called Slow Grow, which reduces the rate of growth of hair in the window between two hair removal procedures.
Okay, so skincare is basically which your facials, and then you retail those products as well.
Yeah. So see, retail, Ritu, if you see a global experience of retail in salons, if you take the benchmark salons who do brilliantly well in retail, across the board, and we have seen examples across Europe, across the US, across Asia, of salons who do extremely well with retail. And there are different models which they follow. But fundamentally, what the difference I see is that there is a very, very strong margin logic for the retail in those countries. And India, today the margin is simply not there. So it is heavily skewed against the seller to the customer in favor of the brand. So to give you a very simple example, if a salon in Malaysia is selling a L'Oreal product, they will get a 45 to 50% margin on the retail price. In India, it's 1/3 of that. And therefore, it becomes very difficult, and retail is a very different business from salon. Right? So, and I think because I still think like a retailer, I joined the retail business so many years ago, along with Raghu. And I still remember, I mean, he had the vision, or I would say it was lucky for me, that at that time he said, so I used to handle a .com before, getting into retail. So he looked at me and said, "Tu .com chalata hai aur abhi retail chalayega?" Maine kaha, "Haan, chalayenge sir." But he said, "Okay, I'll give you a chance." And so after that, it was a very different, scale, or I would say exposure, which I was able to get at that time with the RPG retail. And so from there, what we have seen is that unless there is a very strong process to manage the inventory very well, retail can be a killer, because the margin for error is far lower in retail than in the salon business. Salon business, I think, is probably more generous or more forgiving of errors than the retail business. Retail business is killing. If you can't manage the stock well, it's absolutely impossible to work in retail. And therefore, unless there is a significant, I would say, margin increase and there's a reason to do that, it just doesn't work. So the amount of working capital which you block in the inventories, the amount of shrinkage or the damages or the returns or those kind of things, it appears that so if you are earning 15% after selling a product and out of 20 one product goes bad, you are finished. Your margin is gone. You literally have no earning. So that's not the case in the salon. So I would go a little, I would think a lot before going and which is the reason why also private label. So there is also a commercial reason for the private label, because the margins in the private label are significantly higher as compared to what the branded products offer.
Okay.
And plus for the customer, if a customer trusts YLG and she is looking for a YLG product, then all the more reason why she will come back to me.
So, so you're manufacturing in India or manufacturing outside the country?
So we have a mix both in India and abroad.
So, so my next question is again about the go-to home services, which again you launched pretty early relative to the industry, and how's the experience been? And when you launched it, what were you thinking? Because COVID was not around. So, and you think that it's a very metro phenomena, or do you think it can be, have a scope in tier 2 as well? Because there is a certain fear and this thing around having people over for your personal care services. Although it's extremely convenient, I must say, once you kind of have built that trust. So what's your experience, Vinay? First, why did you launch it so early, and then your experience?
So as Vaijayanti has already explained, we started home services way back in 2000, early 2010. So it's been it's 10 years now since we first started. And there also the thought was that, YLG needs to be with the customer across. It's like a 360 degree. So whether you come to me or I can come to you, or there's a product which you can carry home. So YLG will be with the customer across, it's like a 360 degree relationship with the customer. Right. And that was the thought with which we launched the home services. And what we have seen over the years is that the profile of customers in the home business has probably changed quite a lot. So in the first avatar, what we found was there were two major constituents in the home services business. One set was the slightly, I would say, senior citizens, older people, who for some reason did not want to step out of home, whether it was socially, they didn't want to be seen in the salon, or they had some health reason that they didn't want to go out, or, so it was more convenient to have somebody over at home. And the second constituency was mothers with, small children. And those were the two big constituencies. But in the second avatar of the home salon, what we have seen is the professional working class women are the biggest contributors, which means that now the convenience is being valued very differently from, 7-8 years back. So convenience is going to be a driver for it. So now there is another layer, which is the safety factor. So now we have to see how we can address this convenience plus the safety factor.
And when it comes to service, and do you also notice that they are your loyalty clients also who are availing the service first? Is it something like that? And secondly, do you also feel that the ticket size is lower when it comes to home services?
So our experience has been completely ulta of what you are suggesting.
Okay.
So the home services ticket size is higher than the salon ticket size.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. So that has been consistently the case right from the first and even the second avatar.
Oh.
That's number one. Number two is that the salon customer and the home salon customers, it's like if you draw a Venn diagram, so there is the salon customer, there's the home salon customer. There is a point of intersection where you have common both. You have people who also come to the salon and who also use the home salon services. And there is some people who are only hardcore salon. There are some people who are hardcore home salon. And these, to try and push this into that is very difficult.
That would be dangerous.
But this intersection circle is likely to grow now. Is what we anticipate. Now, whether that sustains over a period of time, that only time will tell. But at least the indications are that this intersection is going to be a little, earlier if it was this, it will be a little more.
So what percentage of business right now is from direct to home services?
So we do about 6%, 7% is what we were doing.
Okay.
Pre-COVID.
All right. So coming to COVID, the big question, where the big question mark came for all our businesses. So how has it been like when you were hit? I would like to know 2-3 things actually. One is, of course, how did you respond to this emergency? And whether you were, for the couple of months that we were completely out of the picture, were you under pressure to maybe lay off people, working for you? And another thing is, what were those things that you have done in the past? For example, maybe a good financial management or a good insurance or whatever, some steps that you might have taken which held you good during these times. So yeah.
You go first, Rao, then I'll follow up.
So I think the first thing is that in the long run, what we look at is the greater good. So if I say pre-COVID, we had about say 700 families or 750 families who were dependent on us, right? So the first response was that if we want to sustain and we want to take care of the larger chunk of these, then we have to take certain hard decisions for a smaller set of the people, but which will be in the interest of the larger set of people whom we can support on a sustainable basis.
I think that was across the board, which was the whole.
What we decided very early on, in fact, even in the month of March, across the board, across the organization, we had already implemented a step salary cut, with the highest cut being for myself and Vaijayanti, and then going down, so that the person at the front end has the least suffering or the least amount of pain. And so we knew that there is going to be less resources, and if everybody shares in that, little bit, then we can last much longer, then we can go much further.
Yeah.
So whatever decisions we had to take, we took very early on.
Sure.
Yeah, because instead of saying that, okay, let us let go of people or, sack people, that's not the way YLG thinks. What we want to do is to take care of our people, but we can take care only if there is a sustainable, business. So if we want a business to sustain, then everybody has to contribute a little bit from their side.
Sure.
So everybody, and the pinch, everybody will feel. We are all of us are feeling the pinch. So there is no point in protecting someone and saying, okay, no, you are a very, you will not get impacted because of whatever reason. Yeah. That's not the correct way. So everybody should be party to contributing towards taking, from their side a little bit of effort in these tough times for the organization. Sure. So that also builds a proper culture and mindset across the team, right? So that is on one front. The second thing is that we have been looking at every single expenditure which we have been doing. As in normal times, you don't really think so much about theek hai, paisa kharch kar do. So we have literally put brakes, or we have rejigged the entire cost structure in the business Um, uh, and that has given us a lot of ability to squeeze out costs, which we earlier thought was normal. It's a small amount, but these small amounts, when you add up, it becomes really, really large, right? So all this has to be done, and that we have been doing it every month. Even now, we continue to. So that's going bound to happen. Technology is going to play a far bigger role in going forward, and certain things like for example, one of the typical things which we tend to spend a lot of money on, or at least YLG used to spend a lot of money on, was in marketing and visuals and all kinds of things.
Right.
But now we have no choice, and I would say it's an opportunity that everything is moving towards technology.
Right.
So the visual mediums, content which is mobile content on tabs, on screens, is what is likely to replace all the paper which you used to, paper or some form of physical prints which we were doing, are likely to get replaced by screens. So there is a technology, there's almost a tectonic shift in the customer, the way they are thinking also.
Right.
They also appreciate that, okay, we don't have paper bills. And, earlier we used to make sure, like, earlier I remember in my retail days, as a customer is stepping out, you need to punch the bill, and so that there is no chori and, all those kind of things. So now is a different environment. So you need to trust the customer, and she also has a far greater trust. So even after your transaction, you get the bill on your phone, and you don't need to, even print out on paper.
Yeah.
Now, these are all costs ultimately when you look at it. So you have to have a printer to do, take the print. Then every customer, so if you're doing 45,000 bills, so 45,000 bills will get printed a month. Then there are settlements and all. So there are costs attached to each of these. And technology is allowing us to do away with certain of these costs also.
Yeah.
So that I would say is a short-term, response. As we go in the medium term, I think the service protocols, the contribution expected from each team member, the model of compensation will be far stronger, or will be far stronger linked to the performance. So there will be a higher part of your compensation which will have to be variable.
Sure.
So taking a certain amount for granted, I mean, the situation is such that for the entire industry, all of us will have to think of how we can have that kind of an accountability. So just because I am a certain level of, skilled person, I cannot demand a certain price. It will no longer work. There has to be a very clear performance linked pay, and that performance linked pay proportion will have to increase significantly as we go forward.
Sure.
To add to that, so in the time which was available with us, we did a lot of morale building exercises also with the team through the various interactions which our team had for various educational programs that we did. Hygiene was one part of it, but also a lot of knowledge giving on different aspects of hair and beauty was also covered in that. And one big advantage I would feel that our team would have felt is that from day one, YLG has always had medical insurance for all the employees.
Okay.
Whether it is ESR, whether it is private medical insurance, it has always been for all employees since the day YLG started. It is one of the measures which we started with actually as a company. So I think that was also a good backup feeling, I think, that the employees had with them during this time.
That's great. Actually, it will be interesting to understand how many employees, of course, you would be having a big number, and how have you kept their morale up? Because it's also a lot about mental health, insecurities coming in, whether, what's going to happen and things like that. And this industry also employs a lot of migrants, as we know. So how is it at your place? How have you handled that?
So in the case of YLG, for us, more than 70% are people who are from the state. That is how the typical composition for us in the team is. And yes, after the states opened up, some people have gone to their own native places. Many of them are in touch and want to come back after some time. The morale building during the lockdown period was one part which we carried out through the Zoom sessions. Now that the lockdown is over and the stores are open, what we are trying to do as much as possible between me, Rahul, and the team is to be seen in the stores. Because the more we are seen, either if it is Chennai, then over a Zoom call because we can't visit there. But in Bangalore, just being able to be able to go to the stores and being seen, so that people can come up to us and talk to us. And if there are some issues or something, we can sort it out then and there for as many people as we can. So that is the thing which we started since the lockdown got over. Just be in this. I have rarely been in the office in the last few days since the lockdown got over. So has Rahul. Both of us have been out there in the stores.
Okay, that's a great strategy to just.
Also, Ritu, one of the things which we did right through the entire lockdown and thereafter is that we have not, sugar-coated our words with the team.
Okay.
So people, they actually want to know the truth.
Yeah.
So it is tough times and everybody has to be prepared for a tough time, So if you tell them that, look, we are headed for a tough time, all of us are in it together, and definitely we will come out of this. And here are the things which if you also support us, we will support you.
Right.
Then the belief that, it will actually work. So as a overall, I think one of the things which we have also seen in the internal surveys and even third-party independent surveys is that there is a lot of trust which our people have on the organization. Because if we say something, then people say that, if it has been said, then that is what will happen. So there is no point in being overly optimistic or, leading them up a garden path saying, bas kuch nahi hai. So either not very optimistic also, not very pessimistic also. But you have to tell them that, this is the truth and it is a difficult time. So everybody needs to share and everybody needs to shape up.
Yeah.
So you have to ask for their participation, but you have to at the same time give them the, confidence or the support that yes, we are there. Yes, it is difficult times. We know you have to do more. I have to do more, but that honest or, straightforward communication makes a lot of difference.
Yeah. And you're known for that.
Yes.
Okay. Now, so going on to my favorite question, or let me just finish with the marketing and communication ones. One more thing is that, going dark, like on the customer with little or no marketing, people will be cutting down on their advertising and, all those budgets. But there's also a study which says if you cut down your advertising and you go dark on the consumer, then maybe even, your business might not, the return of investment, as they say, aayega nahi aayega. But they also say that the business will go down in case you're just completely going dark on the customer, by about 10 or 11%. There's a recent study from Klein that I was reading on Nielsen. So what is your take on that? How are you, kind of planning to do your marketing and communications in the time to come?
So Ritu, the first thing is that we don't want to go dark on the customer at all.
Okay.
So the idea is not to, stop communication with the customer. In fact, if at all anything, we would increase the engagement with the customer.
Sure.
The method of engaging will change. It will not be the method which we have been following earlier.
Yeah.
So it will be the method of reaching out to the customer, engaging with the customer will change. Technology will have a lot of role to play on it. Data analytics will have a lot of role to play in it. But we are not giving up on the customer. So though the marketing dollars might come down, it is not going to impact the connect or the engagement with the customer.
Okay.
And that's the end result is what we are looking at.
Sure. Okay, I understand that. Okay, as a business, you guys have done so well, but as an industry, we are like, we really all over the place. We're just not, and this crisis, like no other, has shown that there's such a need for coming together, such a need for having one voice. And officially, we are 60 to 70 lakh, but actually, it's 2.5 crore people that are involved in this industry, and which is not a mean number. So, where do you think are we going when it comes to, having a unified face to, bring our issues together, whether it's with the government or the other brands or whatever it is.
Yeah. So see, the industry, according to us, definitely is it's ripe. The time is very ripe to have a body which represents the interests, the common interests of the industry.
Sure.
And most certainly it has to be a body which is run by professionals and cannot be driving any individual or a brand's agenda, but has the interest of the industry at its core as a charter. And if we are able to do that and build an organization which is transparent to everybody in the industry, which seeks participation from the industry and represents the interests of the industry or advocates the things which the industry, are genuine issues, common issues which the industry faces, that over a period of time will get a lot of benefit for the industry.
Sure.
So we are looking, as example for reference, frame of reference at bodies like RAI, Retail Association of India, or NRAI, the Restaurant Association, then NASSCOM, which is there for IT. So these are organizations which are built with professionals who are employed under that, and whose sole purpose is to follow the charter which is there for that body. So it's not influenced by any particular individual or a brand, but the overall well-being of the industry and advocacy for the industry, taking the message of the industry, the needs of the industry to the right place at the right time in a right way. That is the sole purpose of that body. And that is the inspiration that we are looking at, to be able to have something like this, where it becomes over a period of time a trusted organization, that people feel that, okay, this is an independent body which is looking at the interest in a completely non-partisan way and only works for the betterment of the industry, and engages on certain places at with full-time focus, which the brands and all that cannot themselves bring forth. That is the way of looking at that particular entity.
Sure. Okay, that makes sense. And we'll hopefully see that kind of a body emerge very soon. Okay.
Yes.
So coming to the favorite question now, you have been, both of you have been in this business for a while, and you have built it together. And I would love to hear how difficult or easy it is as a couple to work together and set your other differences aside, set your domestic, the daily fights aside, and unite for business and, demarcate your roles. How have you done that? We'd love to hear about
that. So I think the lucky part in this case has been that we bring completely different complementary skills to the table. Sure. Both of us. So, it's like chalk and cheese, having two very different sets of skills being brought together, which is a great thing, because it also means that one holds of that area and takes it ahead, right? And that's very important, I think, not to have competition between two partners, to be able to make a successful venture out of anything. That's the most important thing. And one thing which we have, had to bring in consciously from our side is that to not be soft on each other on certain things which would not, you would normally go soft on, thinking that, okay, this is my partner, how will I say this, right? So there has to be a space in which you should be able to say these things without either side taking offense that mujhe kaise bol diya, that kind of a thing, that shouldn't happen. And the golden rule, I think you spoke about it, not to take things home. You know, if at all things have to be taken home from the business, they should be the positive ones. Not the negatives. Definitely not the negatives.
Correct. Rahul, you want to add?
I think, I mean, as a, what we have, solved the problem, I would say, in some form, is by having very clear role definitions.
Sure.
And so many things you can sense, I'm sure, from the answers which you get from her and from me. We are very, very different individuals.
Yes.
So I look at finance, operations, part of marketing, and the entire skilling, the education, HR, inventory, product, SOPs, everything is done by Jayanti.
Right. Okay.
So it's very clear.
Yeah, that's the thing. I think we've lost Jayanti here, but I think
I'm sure she'll join in a minute.
Yeah, but we are. I think we are almost done with the questions. But another thing that what is exciting is that now you have the next generation also stepping in. With Aishwarya doing some great work with. How do you see that panning out in the future? How are you training her to take it out?
See, as a parent, or I would say not as a parent, but as a guide for her, what we are trying to do is to expose her to, at a high level, to how the business is being run. Right. And of course, she has developed a lot of, I would say, specialty skills which we don't have. Where, like she's very, very savvy on Instagram, and she's driving that part for YLG, which is, I think we are one of the most active brands on Instagram, on the digital mediums. She's very active on analytics. That's her strength. But the idea is to give her a slightly broader perspective of the business. And I think she's very clear that in the long run, she loves this business because, they grew up with this and they love the space we are in. And being girls, I think it's even more, natural affinity is also there. But I think she's very clear that she is going to be doing something different for herself in the long run.
Sure. So different from the business, apart from the business?
Definitely not YLG.
Okay, all right. Okay, that remains to be seen, of course. And of course, they should be allowed to kind of fly and experiment and do their own thing. So fantastic talking to both of you, and wish you well for the forward movement of the salons in Bangalore and Chennai, and hopefully expansion up north too. And let's keep connected and stay safe, both of you.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Ritu.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Stay safe. Take care.
You too.
Okay, take care.
Bye.
Bye.